before I introduce our wonderful panel here, I mean, I have to say I'm very honored to be here. I am reminded of how incredibly important these platforms are, and I want to really thank Emmanuel and Becky to bring us all together. It has been so informative. My world is the art world, and I'm one of those real people that struggle on a daily basis with everything that we've been discussing here. We are facing so many challenges, and my world being the art world. And to give you some background on where I come from, I'm an art advisor and had a commercial gallery for quite a while. But then for years I wanted to do something bigger that can contribute, initiatives that contribute to my community. My tool, my vehicle being art. I was very, very fortunate when I was approached to be part of the team to open Africa's largest contemporary museum in Cape Town. So for 3-4 years we were in construction phase. We were building, creating the structures for a museum on world standard. We opened in September 2017, and it was an incredible moment, I think, for the continent, specifically for culture. Then I moved to another new museum, built that up, opened it exactly a year ago, called the Norval Foundation. It lies in Cape Town, in a beautiful area called Steenberg. It lies in a wetland, in a protected biodiversity wetland, and our focus is not only on the preservation of art, but also of this beautiful nature area that we are the custodians of. So it has been amazing, being part of a world that is moving. We also have, we're the custodians of archives of artists, specifically the Alexis Preller archive. We look after the Eduardo Villa archive at the foundation, and there was nowhere ever a home for this. So these were all things that I only lately, falling into philanthropy in this way, see how important it is. I believe that culture, and specifically cultural platforms, are very, very important. I believe that the protection of our heritage has an influence far beyond our time and our shores. Celebrating what makes us unique and what tells our stories, and yesterday we heard so much about telling our own stories in our own voices.
It is the phenomenon that Africa is really the world's hotbed of megafauna. We are such a great continent, the only continent left on planet Earth with what we call megafauna. Elephants, giraffes, lions, rhinos, all these huge animals. These animals are beloved all over the world because of National Geographic, BBC. Those films are not available in Africa, free to air, which means actually most Africans have never seen them. If you were to ask Kenyans how many protected areas have you been to, it would be maybe 15-20% of Kenyans have been to a national park. We have over 200 national protected areas in Kenya. Most Kenyans cannot name more than 3 of them. And the protection of this phenomenal landscapes that we have, the biodiversity that we have, is not just about tourism, which is what we often hear people saying. Our wilderness spaces and scapes are extremely important as places that are the source of biodiversity, which is critical for pollination services, agriculture, for example. Of course, we do generate revenue. Most of our protected areas are also watersheds. That leads to agriculture, energy production, clean water for people to consume. That affects our health as well. It's also an important part of our heritage. We often find ourselves stuck in a trap because we're being told by our governments these protected areas need to pay. They need to generate revenue in order to survive, and I think that's a really unfortunate situation where our governments put so little money into protection of the natural environment. Our governments put 1.7% in, philanthropists put in 2%. This was a figure that we heard yesterday. I'm just going to give you an example of one foundation that I'm involved with that has given us some small money. They told me that they contributed $7 million into East Africa in the last, between 2013 and 2023. Of this, 94% of that money went to foreigners working in East Africa. 94%. So you know, African conservationists working in this incredible continent are really faced with a very, very serious challenge. In fact, you'll often find that they're squabbling with each other because there's so little funding available for them. Kola would say, this is a great opportunity. And it is. My first love is elephants. These are extraordinary animals, the largest living terrestrial animals. Elephants are like human beings. They live in families. They're very compassionate. They care for each other. They have language. Most people don't know that elephants actually have language. They can transfer knowledge from generation to generation. They have huge brains, bigger than ours, by 3 or 4 times. The complexity of their brains is such that we will probably never uncover their secrets, because we don't even have the capacity to understand how they navigate, how they consume information, and how they use that information. Amboseli is a national park in Kenya which has the longest running research in elephants anywhere in the world, 45 years. That is about half the life of an elephant. And it's the longest running research anywhere in the world. It's one of the best studied animals on the planet. In Amboseli, every single elephant is known by name because they've been researched for so long. Their families, their birthdays, their aunts and uncles, and mothers and brothers and cousins. It's all known. They've been studied in such depth. This is Kumquat, the matriarch of the QB family, the elephant family, the name after letters in the alphabet. She's famously photographed. People fly from all over the world to come and photograph these magnificent animals because you can get so close to them. And you get these extraordinary photographs, which, by the way, are worth a lot of money. One photograph by Nick Grant is worth about $50,000. Okay, he's paying park entrance, you can $50,000 per photograph himself, which I think is fantastic because now these elephants are known all over the world. Well, in 2010, the day after this photograph was taken, Kumquat and her entire family was gunned down. They were gunned down for their tusks, which were taken to probably China, half a world away, to serve the ivory trade. The ivory trade reopened partially in 2009, when the world made a decision at a huge convention to allow the sale of ivory from 4 southern African countries to China and Japan. That triggered a massive explosion of poaching across the continent. At its height, one elephant was being killed every 15 minutes. 35,000 elephants every year were being slaughtered. Not just matriarchs, also the bulls. As I said, these are compassionate animals. They care about each other. An elephant gets injured, first the gunshot will be heard not just in the distance of that gunshot. Those elephants are communicating to other elephants. Their voices can carry through sub-infrasonic frequencies. They can be heard 12 to 20 kilometers away. So they are communicating with each other. They're approaches in this area, they're approaches in this area. These are bulls in Masai Mara. The death of one animal, the other elephants come to try and help them. They are all vulnerable. They're all probably going to get killed as well. The death of elephants, some people think, well, they're just big, gigantic animals walking around all the time. So what if they're being killed? So what if they disappear? These are ecological engineers. Elephants change landscapes, keep them diverse. They transmit nutrients across vast landscapes because they eat over 100 kilograms of vegetation every single day. They walk 40 to 50 kilometers in a day. Many species of plants will only germinate if they've gone through the gut of an elephant. In Kenya, what we saw after 2009 was a rise in poaching. And then it dropped off again. And I'm going to tell you what happened, how we were able to achieve that. So, at the height of poaching, we lost several hundred elephants. I think it was about over 400 elephants in 2012. That was the height of the problem in Kenya. Meanwhile, our neighbor Tanzania was killing 1,000 elephants per day. Sorry, per month. 1,000 elephants per month. And over 10,000 elephants per year. We basically, as conservationists in Kenya, I'm a PhD, so I study elephants, I love elephants, but it's very hard to love an animal and research it just for the joy of doing research. They are fascinating animals, but we had to do something about this crisis. we launched a campaign called Hands Off Our Elephants. We declared that they were ours as Africans, and we are going to defend them. I'm sure you all know, you've watched Nigeria, you've watched UBC. I bet you've never seen an African narrator or host of any of those shows talking about our African animals. So we decided we're going to take back this narrative, they are our elephants, and we're going to challenge our own government because they are our elephants. So we went out to figure out what is happening to our elephants. Why is Kenya such a safe haven for poachers and traffickers of ivory? What can we do to turn this around? We went into the courtrooms. Most conservationists raise money globally saying, elephants are dying, let's raise money, let's get more boots on the ground, more guns, more rangers, more vehicles. We didn't. We went into the courtroom to find out what is really happening when poachers get arrested, what happens in the courtroom. We went into the registries, we put cameras in the courts, and we monitored the trials and analyzed all that information. I hired a bunch of lawyers from Kenya School of Law to do this for me. They went out and looked at how poachers or traffickers were actually doing their business. And we produced a report. We found that although over 2,000 people were being arrested every year, only 743 cases were actually in the court report, and 70% of the cases were missing or lost. 70%. Actually, what's interesting is when we took this to the Chief Justice, he started laughing. He said, that's normal in Kenya. That's normal, any kind of crime. So this is corruption. This is the face of corruption. This is what we were dealing with. We decided that we weren't going to accept that. We went straight to the newsrooms. We were put on, on the floor together with the wildlife authority who was saying, you guys are exaggerating. So we were made to debate this publicly on national television. And we went and enlisted our own Kenyan celebrities. Juliani, a Kenyan hip-hop artist from the slums of Nairobi, we got him out to speak out for elephants, for Kenya. We got Kenyan corporates to partner with us and share the information and join the campaign. But the most important campaigner for us was Kenya's First Lady, Margaret Kenyatta, who agreed to be the patron of our campaign. So she joined us, she penned letters in the press, she went on television, she engaged First Ladies from across Africa. She's the first lady in the world to take on a wildlife campaign. We went into schools, spoke to children, we went to communities, got them engaged in this issue, and then we declared a national disaster because the government wasn't acting fast enough. And what I'm trying to show you is that, as people, as we are, some of us are scientists, some of us are lawyers, some of us are just activists, we are able to move things very quickly. We launched public demonstrations in the streets of Nairobi just a few weeks ago. We had 4,000 people marching in the streets of Nairobi. We went to the Chief Justice, the Director of Public Prosecution, we went to Parliament. And we asked for several things. We asked for laws to be changed and for criminals to be arrested. We put out our new report. We actually were able to enact new legislation. They increased the bail, bond, jail sentences, and now you can get up to 92% of your case files because of the system that we've now put in place in Kenya. The biggest ivory kingpin was jailed for 20 years, and then we went out to train magistrates, frontline prosecutors, people who are at the, dealing with the cases themselves of crime scenes, and communities. We went and trained communities about new laws and their rights and responsibilities. We joined the Kenyan government in destroying the ivory stockpile as a demonstration that having that stockpile was a threat as well. So it's not just about elephants, right? So we've shown that we can do so much, but it is not just about elephants. In fact, it's a lot about governance. It's about our role in driving change. This ivory kingdom was released after 3 years. We have other problems. We have so many species at risk. We have development taking place in our national parks. This is because of environmental legislation, it's not about health. We have human-wildlife conflict that is hurting poor people the most. We have children who are learning about wildlife and it's being killed on their doorstep. And then we have these phenomenal heroes like Richard Herrera, an inventor whose invention of flashing lights helped save his father's livestock. He got into the TED stage. He got a scholarship to the top school in Kenya. Now he's in Kigali at the ALU. Our goal is to connect people to wellness so that they will value and act to save it. And we've done this by taking our campaigns onto television because we want to have our own stories told.
So I'm very, very delighted that I can be here this morning to give a presentation. To first talk about myself, as already indicated, my name is Agyiri, Wellington. I don't want to remember Henry, but I remember Agyiri. Henry Wellington sounds too European. So my name is very European, but I'm Ghanaian, born and bred in Ghana. And I have a very unique history. You can see from the color of my hair that I'm a recycled scholar. I recycled once. I did my initial academic work at the Quantum University of Science and Technology for about 30 years. I was teaching architecture and urban design. And eventually I got into university administration for 4 years when I acted as Pro-Vice Chancellor to support the then Vice Chancellor, and then later became Director of Quality Assurance and Strategic Planning. But whilst I was doing all this, I was engaged in very serious research because when I was in full-time teaching, I wasn't having enough time to do what I normally like to do, research. But when I became an administrator, when I got to do the lines, I began to have more time to research. And I went to very serious research in heritage, especially related to the built environment and the life of families. Now, as a result of the research work I was doing in heritage, UNESCO got to know about me, and I was given a number of research contracts to work on heritage issues in Ghana and West Africa, especially Togo. Through that, I built quite an extensive experience, which has been of great benefit to me as a person. I completed my teaching at the University of Ghana last semester, and then whilst I was thinking of doing something new to do my third recycling, I was approached by the Ghana Museums and Ruins Board and the UNESCO in Ghana to take up responsibility to oversee the restoration of one of the European fortifications in Ghana, namely Fort Amsterdam. So I'm currently involved in the restoration of one of the very first fortifications built by first the British and then the Dutch seized it by force, and eventually the British regained it. Now, this fort is known, as I said already, Fort Amsterdam, located in a place in the central region of Ghana, a place called Agyiri. And interestingly enough, the fort, which was originally supposed to be at Comantin, was located at Agyiri. Agyiri is a Frankish word which means under the fort or around the fort. It happened that the original place which was Comantin, where the fort was going to be built, was not very much, the local people were not in agreement with it. So eventually the fort was built at Agyiri, and that began to create a settlement around it. Now, interesting enough, although the fort was known as Fort Amsterdam, the literature was known as, or became the so-called Fort Comantin, and the then enslaved people who were brought from West Africa and from Ghana, many parts of Ghana, were sent to the Caribbean, became known as the Comantin slaves, who were supposed to be the leaders of the rebellions which took place in the Caribbean at that time. So this fort, which I'm working on at the moment, is a very historic place and very senior place. It was one of the first forts which had dungeons, slave dungeons. The Air Force, like Elana Castle and People Castle, did not have dungeons originally meant for enslaved people. They were meant to store goods. But it was for Amsterdam that there was a design meant to keep the enslaved people in transition, not in the open, but in the underground. Now, this is a slide showing a team of the Europeans who are involved in financing the restoration of Amsterdam. They happen to be Italians, an NGO group known as ONUS. And this was taken at the time when the fort was being handed over to them, because the fort, being a World Heritage Site, belonged to not only to Ghana but the rest of the world. And so if there was a work to be done there, there was a need to give a permission from UNESCO and from the Ghana Museum Board to the contractor to enter the site. This picture was taken on that occasion. The long one shows the people who witnessed the handing over of the site to the contractor. And you can see me sitting in the middle because I was supposed to be in charge of the whole restoration program. Now, the reason why I'm showing this slide is to tell you about the issue I have about the topic. The topic says new opportunities to give respect to conservation and preservation, and especially to literature and rural conservation. But my work in this area convinces me that when it comes to philanthropy, there's nothing new about giving to support the work of restoration works or conservation works or preservation works. It's a known thing, it's a common thing. So, whilst I was thinking about the topic, in my mind, what was occurring to me was strategies. I was thinking about new strategies for giving with respect to conservation and preservation. Now, this slide next to those showing the Amsterdam, for the Amsterdam thing, is a pull-up of a documentation of one of the things we have been doing with respect to conservation and preservation. My great interest is to document not only the material dimensions of the properties we have, but also the intangibles which are associated with this. Because writing will give to support our work. Now, this slide is to show again the challenges we have in terms of how we be able to get the resources to ensure that we keep our heritage conserved. Quickly, I'm ending this slide with this picture, this image, to let you know what sort of response we should give, as we want to say, we as Africans, to our heritage. Recently, we heard about the destruction of Notre Dame Cathedral, and the response which the world gave to giving support to restore it. I'm wondering what lessons we have to derive from the response for us as Africans. Do we have to wait until our heritage, our heritage is destroyed by fire before we come to this thing? No. We should be able to respond to the challenges of making sure that we keep our heritage, intact. Now, so I said there's a need for us to create a provident fund to be able to create the resources by which we'll be able to address the need of conservation of our heritage. Thank you very much.
I'm going to give you like a short background in terms of where I come from as an artist. I'm a dropout. I was supposed to study chemical engineering. I think on my third month, I realized that that was not something that was actually for me. And I switched to enroll in a community college, artist group studio, which is actually in downtown Johannesburg. Education is pretty much one of the most important elements. And as a young artist, one of the challenges that I actually had, and which you actually see as part of my slide later on as well, was that our history, my first introduction to history of art was it was Renaissance, and which was actually mainly European. Well, I'll just say it was actually Western as well. What was so interesting about it was that for me to discover myself, it was when the first time I saw the work of DFA, which is South African artist who went to exile. It really took me some time to really realize that the slow growth of contemporary art in the continent, it has to do with culture and heritage. That our youth are not being properly introduced to our history, especially that has to do with art as well, and the importance of heritage as well. I started donating work when I had little in my account. I started to actually understand the power of giving when I was trying to sell my work as an artist. That today, art is still used as part of charity in most cases. Artists are still giving. That today, I am part of the newer generation who are actually finding a different way of giving. I used to get excited to get on a plane to go and exhibit in New York, Paris, London. But one of the most key points and the most interesting things that you wake up one day and you realize that the place that has actually inspired you and built you is not a place where you get excited to actually show work, actually exhibit your work as well. Because honestly speaking, part of our history is, especially within the arts, there's still a big question mark about it. This year, Feb, one of my work was raised on the cover of the Time. I was actually commissioned the issue of autism as well. The reason why I agreed to do that was because of the cost of change sometimes is actually start with one individual who is in an opportunity. But it was also after that I also got to learn a lot of things as well, because part of that work that was actually sort of historical work is still there in my place, still there in my house, which that work was supposed to be placed somewhere where each and every African can have access to that, which leads to a question in terms of what are we doing to actually restore and make sure that part of our history is being actually placed in houses where each and every young African, young or old, can actually have access to that, which that leads to responsibility for artists to say, what are we doing to actually make sure that we build institutions that will allow and give access to the next generation of artists, and actually also remind them that we're living in a continent that has so much potential as well.
So let's see your images.
This is the image that was on the cover of the Time. The cover was unveiled on Feb, which is the Black History Month. As a young African who travels around the world, one of the most beautiful things was not for me to travel around the world, but to travel within the continent. And we still have borders that doesn't give us the free access to roam around a place that we call home as well. That as an artist, it's always a shame whenever you go out and you get to actually see and explore others, but you don't actually get to explore your own as well. That in my work, I get to share the beauty and get to tell the story of the people whom I know very well, that the first beauty that I get to understand was through an African child. That is only within the southern region that I actually get to document. That I really make it part of my mission that my next exhibition will be to actually explore the whole continent and actually come back to present this is what I actually experienced as well. Frame Academy. it is really truly a blessing to be in this time because there's other Africans who are also, making sure that this continent grows, regardless of how others actually look at it as well. In the image is Laduma and DJ Black Coffee. The three of us, we actually got together to start an academy of music, art and fashion. The reason why we actually got together to start music, art and fashion is because of the organization doesn't actually give us their introduction to music, art and fashion. And like I mentioned before, it's all Western, it's non-African as well. And we figured the most important thing is for us to start an institution that will allow Africans to actually get their curriculum as far as music, arts, and fashion is concerned. We already are on our first foundation. We've actually allocated the building. The aim of the project is for us to fundraise, looking for funders outside Africa. We thought it would be important for us to actually make sure that when we do this, we actually get on the ground and actually go on with this project. So that it actually is a constant reminder for those who want to be part of this that anything is possible as long as they actually work as units and as a community as well. There's an African saying that says it takes a village to reach out. The model of giving back, I've donated money before. I realized that is not the best way of giving back, but building an institution that will allow others to actually access information is actually the best form of giving back as well. And another reason why we also started this academy is because of based on our success, there's a lot of young people who are actually coming to us and asking us to actually mentor them. And we thought it would be best for us to put together a model that would actually mentor multiple that actually and multiple individuals to be possible as well. This project is not just only for the three of us, and the reason why we call family is family, that means each and every person can be part of this as well. But it actually allows and gives us opportunities to actually see and explore and interact with others within the continent. And see what we can do in terms of putting together probably one of the most unique institutions in the continent that will also allow the world to see what we are and what kind of talent is actually coming from the continent. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shubinski, and I'm the Director of Research and Education at the Rockefeller Archive Center. We're located in Tarrytown, New York, just north of New York City. Our name can be confusing, the Rockefeller Archive Center, so I wanted to just spend a minute telling you that Rockefeller is our origin story, but it is not the limitation of where we are today. We do hold records of the Rockefeller family, as well as the philanthropies that spun out of that family's giving. But over the years, since we opened in 1974, we've become probably the largest repository for the study of the philanthropy in the third sector in the U.S. And as you all know, U.S.-based philanthropy has global reach. And I'll talk a little bit about the power dynamics embedded in that. I don't want to ignore them. But I do want to suggest that one thing that we find people come to use our collections for is for the stories of those grassroots and community organizations who often are not able to keep their records or are not able to make them widely available. So we find the pieces of those stories embedded in grant records and in the work of some of the larger foundations. We educate new audiences. Partly we do this through my division's outreach programs. We have a real emphasis now that's growing on reaching out to the general public, talking to people about the forces that end up shaping their lives that they may actually not even be aware of. The third sector is little understood, even often by people in the sector, but certainly often by people outside the sector. It's kind of an invisible force. So we really make an attempt to reach out to those audiences. So how does it work? We get about 400 visitors from 25 different countries at the center nationally, annually. But we also answer well over 2,000 research requests remotely. We offer an online finding aids. This goes back again to that concept of findability. Travel can be prohibitive. So one thing that's increasingly happening in our place that's very important to us is making as many resources as we can available through digital scans. We also keep, I'll point you on the right-hand side here, we keep a bibliography of scholarship that's been done on these records, or using these records. And to harken back to the panel from earlier this morning about academia, we have currently registered in our bibliography of scholarship well over 7,000 different journal articles, books, and other publications done by scholars who have used the resources at the Archive Center. Innovating for the digital future, many foundations and other organizations are now either tending towards or have already gone completely paper-free. So to go back to that question about access and findability, one really key issue in doing research in the field is that you be able to find the data that you need to do the research. Paper-based records are one thing. They have a lot of issues about temperature and humidity control and safe housing and all of that. Digital records have an additional issue. For one thing, they seem readily available to people, but they degrade just as paper does. But secondly, findability. So like in the paper world, if you have a giant basement, and that's essentially what the Archive Center is, times 20. The paper's there, and eventually, if someone stumbles into the room at some point in the future, they can find stuff eventually. In the digital world, if you don't make it findable and you don't preserve it, it in effect does not exist. If you can't see it, it's invisible and it's gone. So this is a huge concern for us as we move into the future about preserving the footprint of what philanthropy does. So we have a whole team that's building an intake structure for more digital records, which we call Project Electron. We're building it on open source software as well, so we're aiming to be leaders in the field who readily share our resources. It's not proprietary, and it's open to be shared and accessed by universities, centers, other places of research and education. We also do a fair bit of outreach, often to our own donor organizations when they need to hear about their own history. This is actually a location in our vaults. That's a website that we built for the general public to use that does like a little bit of an introduction to Rockefeller Foundation history. We've been able to work with some of our key donor institutions to try to communicate their histories more accessibly on the web. I don't know how to play this little the middle part. So just to sort of do an overview of the types of materials that we hold in our vaults, because I think the types of materials offer a lot of insight into how those materials can be used. Foundation annual reports are a big source of information for people doing research on the sector. I always caution people that Foundation annual reports are a performative act. So it's not that they're untrue, but they're not the whole truth, and they need to be taken as a public-facing statement about what foundations think that they do, or want to say that they do. So they're just really the tip of the iceberg. So foundation planning and policy documents become very important towards getting into the mindset of program design, strategy, and mission. Foundation reports, sometimes conducted by external reviewers and sometimes by internal reviewers, can give you a deeper dive into program strategy and design, as well as outcomes. Grant files. The other thing I like to say is grant making is also only the tip of the iceberg as far as what foundations actually do. Time and time again, even in the sector, I go to these sort of gatherings where people try to track grant making. And I keep thinking, well, it's important to chase the data about the dollars, but that's really only one facet of how foundations interact with communities. So I'm always a little, again, kind of grain of salt about grant making records. It's a place to start, but it's not always the full measure of the sort of convenings and conversation buildings and sort of uses of money and power that affect communities on their own. Officers' diaries and trip logs can be invaluable, particularly in the historical era. Back in the day, program officers of major foundations had to keep track of literally everyone they ever spoke to and every trip that they took. We're not so great anymore, despite all of our affordable technology at actually doing that so much. We have over 4,000 different films, audiovisual recordings. We also have a whole set of oral histories from several different foundations. So these are just other types of records, and I hope in the discussion I can get into some of the pros and cons about the different records. Special formats. Often they'll be used for promotional and campaign posters from various things. And the photographic record, which is really invaluable, and not everyone always takes the time to keep it. So a few just closing reflections. This has been a very quick swoop through what we do and what we hold. But again, I want to emphasize, please use our resources, but please create your own resources. And please encourage the sector in your locality to think about creating repositories where academic research, most of our researchers are academic scholars, but not all. We also have journalists, people who are doing family genealogical research, community-based organizations, so it's not all scholarly. I just wanted to reflect on some things that I've been hearing this weekend, and I'm sitting in the back sort of jotting notes through many panels, going back to yesterday's first one. What I use these records for is to look at change over time in terms of things like goals and indicators, in terms of things like these 3 to 5 year time horizons. When did those first start happening? Why? In terms of the very idea about metrics and measurability, because that is something that has changed over time. And changes in boards of trustees, term limits. These are the kinds of things that affect the institutional culture of institutions and how those foundations then enact their programs on the ground. Who the recipients are. That shift from sort of funding the elite established institutions to funding grassroots community organizations, and how that plays out differently in terms of how the foundations assess risk and success and failure. How grantees today are often expected to work to carry out program strategy for foundations, and they aren't just grant recipients, as used to be the case a few decades ago. I think our records can help us complicate the top-down dynamic in many ways. Think about what goals were back when. Think about things that have changed negatively and positively. In the US, there's been a decline in the ability to fund individuals, for example. Another thing I always want to ask about our records is who gets left out of the story, and what can I read in between the lines to put those characters back in. What about time horizons? What does that tell us about trust? Right? The trust of recipients. So when I was thinking yesterday about that trajectory from elite institutions to grassroots groups, and the simultaneous shortening of time horizons and the use of metrics, to me that communicates a trust issue. So that's something that those records kind of explode open for me. I'm also thinking, as has come up several times, this issue about first generation, second and third generation givers. Because I would say that the records we hold, partially the Rockefeller family and the Ford family, the Russell Sage family. We have a number of kind of individual records that sit alongside the foundation records and can really start to delineate that first, second, and third generation of giving. And think about ways that philanthropy has enhanced reputation, for example, or has attempted to enact larger goals. So I just want to leave those questions on the table and return to the panel, and I hope you'll have some questions for me. And thank you.
Well, sometimes I see that some of our patrons or collectors believe when they buy work from an artist that they actually support the artist. They don't actually understand that they're actually investing, they're getting a piece, but they believe. So there's so many things, and a platform like this makes us just so much more aware. I mean, I loved what Imo had said earlier on about all these incredible scholars and academic research that you've done, and the way that you have to try and get that to us, because we on a daily basis are trying to create accessible platforms and to reach people.
I'm from Botswana, and we have a very unique problem that we have the largest population of elephants in the continent in the world, and the reason we have over 400,000 in a population of 2 million people. And the reason for that is that the elephants are coming from Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, because Botswana is quite a peaceful country. So the issue that we're facing is that of human-wildlife conflict. We lost one of our citizens last week. That's the recent stats. And it's been going on for some time, but I feel like our current president is not really focusing on that. And in fact, he had a conference last week where he invited a lot of the leaders from the populations that do have elephants to discuss this issue. And a lot of the times we get bullied by philanthropists and family foundations and charity organizations that have this romanticized view of elephants. Trust me, they're wonderful, but an elephant is not a dog. How do you go and catch it, and especially if we've got 400,000 of them, and it goes on most of our populations in the South. So you can imagine, people are overwhelmed, crops are being destroyed. We did have a shoot-to-kill policy. We had very stringent policies in terms of conservation. So we've lived in harmony with these creatures, but we're in such a compromised position now. And my president is for the community. We spoke about community philanthropy and organizations and entities sort of consulting with communities as what they feel about way forwards. And I feel like a lot of the philanthropists and organizations and the family foundations are not listening to the communities.
I think in Conservation Lab and even today, I mean, there's no question, there are so many common issues across Africa. Everywhere that there are elephants, there are challenges. They are large animals, and we do have people living with them wherever they are. My story about Kenya is that when elephants are in a safe place, they behave very differently from when they're in a place where they are stressed. They actually behave very differently. It's not about having one story. It's about Africa uniting around this great species that we have and working together to save it for Africa. Because we all want elephants. I can't think of a single country that says we don't want elephants. Actually, the Botswana, in the Kasane conference that just took place, the Botswana president was very clear. Botswana does want elephants. Elephants are good for the economies of African countries. And yes, there is human-wildlife conflict. If you put it on a scale of, let's say, vehicles and accidents, you wouldn't say, let's get rid of all vehicles, because there are far more people die from car accidents than from elephants. But it doesn't mean that people are not suffering as a result of elephants. Of course they are. My pitch today, and I never got to that last slide, which I really apologize for. My pitch is that when it comes to nature and the environment, and this phenomenal, extraordinary biodiversity that we have in Africa, Africa needs to come together. We need to have all those stories brought together. We need to present our case to the world, not as Kenya versus Botswana, but as Africa saying, this is a global heritage, and we need to work together to support it. You're absolutely right. There are concentrations of elephants in some countries as a result of the poaching in other countries. If that poaching pressure was off, we wouldn't have those concentrations. So there are solutions that we know about. South Africa has innovated extraordinarily well on solving some of these challenges. And to be honest, there will always be challenges. There will probably always be malaria and other diseases as well. So we will always be facing challenges and having to deal with those challenges as they come up. But I think what the gap is for Africa is we've never pitched our wildlife, biodiversity, our megafauna as an asset for the continent that deserves the attention of philanthropists around the world, because everyone around the world loves elephants, rhinos, giraffes, hippos, and all these species which we tend to take for granted. Yeah, we take it for granted here in Africa, and those people who live with them may not love them, but around the world they are loved. What we need is for, I think, another source of support. So in Botswana the problem is there enough money to pay? Same in Kenya. There was a human-wildlife conflict conference yesterday in Nairobi, and the same thing came up. These poor communities, they're losing their children, they're losing their property, they're losing their crops. The government can't afford to pay compensation. We do have that challenge across the whole continent, and it's mostly about money.